Hello everyone, this is powponderonweather. In this update, we're going to be talking about severe weather, an ice storm, and the next significant snowstorm that's coming. So if you're new to the channel, click the subscribe button and notification bell to get all my daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. Good morning everyone, how are you doing out there? Let's take a look at the overall water vapor imagery on the North American view this morning, and we can see where kind of the active weather is. Yesterday we had numerous tornado warnings down here in the Houston area with some of that severe weather that broke out. We talked about it yesterday and it really intensified as we got into the evening hours. Now that's still hanging around. It's into Louisiana. It's going to be pulling all that warm Gulf moisture. It's all foggy down here in our southern states, but it's going to be pulling inland and portions of the midsection of the country, getting into the Tennessee Valley with some heavier rain. And unfortunately, we got an icy setup this morning with an ice storm as well into parts of the mid-Atlantic states. So let's kind of zoom into the severe weather threat today, because they do have an upgraded slight risk for severe weather and a 5% chance for tornadoes down here. The main culprit is damaging gust. Couple of tornadoes and isolated large hail will be possible today on parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. It was over Houston area yesterday. Now that has shifted off into the east, so we have severe weather on the south side, and as you get further to the north, that's where we have some of that heavier rain going to be impacting portions of Tennessee and as well as Kentucky. But we've got a pretty significant ice threat as well up here into the mid-Atlantic states and the Northeast and southern New England, where they've got winter weather advisories right now for that blaze to a 1/10 of an inch of ice that's coating the road with that freezing rain. And this kind of a bullseye here into central PA here, portions of Williamsport, Lock Haven, as well as State College. That is an ice storm warning, guys, and that's significant icing with the accumulations of a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch in those areas. That makes dangerous travel conditions. It's very difficult to get around in this part of the country this morning. So please take extra caution if you have to leave the house and drive in that mess, because it's tough. It's very difficult to drive on ice. I mean, you can't. I mean, you just got no steering current, so it's very dangerous to be out on the roadways in this type of atmosphere. But things should start to settle down once we get into the late afternoon hours and especially into the evening. But man, it's still going to be cold up here where they went through that snowstorm, and now they're getting that ice storm on top of it. So let's take a look at the flooding threat for today, because like I mentioned, that severe threat is going to be on the south side, but as you live further to the north, we're still going to have that training convective banding of thunderstorms lifting with that plenty of Gulf moisture lifting up from the north with that warm front coming in. We're still going to be looking at some heavier rains into portions of Louisiana, getting into southern portions of Arkansas here, Mississippi, Alabama, especially into Tennessee, and going into Kentucky again, and this will eventually get into portions of West Virginia as well, with that heavier rain moving in for this afternoon. But I wanted to take a look at this, so because here's the temperature anomalies so far for the month of January, and it's been a drastic difference from what we saw from the month of December, right? I mean, it's been well below average in the midsection of the country in our northern states, of 14 to 17 below average temperatures so far in the first week of January. But I wanted to point out this out here into the portions of the east and especially the northeast here. This is actually above average. And take a look at where the snowfall has been predominantly. Yes, we've had some snow up here to the north where it has been cold. Yes, we had that mountain snow out in the Pacific Northwest, but we had all that snow down here in the south and portions of the Tennessee Valley and Kentucky and getting up into the mid-Atlantic states and the Northeast. Well, all these areas were above average. So that just goes to show you, this is January, folks. We're getting to the heart of winter. You don't actually have to have below average temperatures to see snowfall this time of year, all right? So it could still be above average and have actually 2 pretty significant snowstorms happening in that time frame. But we have plenty of cold air coming for the rest of January. I can promise you that up here. Things really start to get cranking, especially in the second half of January. So we're going to take a look at some of the storm tracks that are coming. So first, by the 11th, we got a piece of that polar vortex that's going to be kind of branching off and elongating and going to be parked itself over New England, bringing its by far the coldest temperatures of the season. And then you can see the rest of the country pretty much warms up, kind of above average temperatures. But we're looking at these troughs out here, off the west coast here. That is actually the beginnings of our next snowstorm that's actually going to be developing towards Friday into the weekend. So let's take a look at some of these temperatures coming up on Tuesday morning, the 11th here. These are actually feels like temperatures, and this is dangerous, folks. We're talking all these temperatures in the purple here are below zero feels like temperatures, and it gets really brutal as you get up into upstate New York and get into portions of Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, going into Maine with that 20 to 30 degrees below average of, below zero feels like temperatures. And regular temperatures are approaching, teens and almost 20 degrees below zero. So single digits along the coast, and it's not out of the question some of these areas could actually drop below zero for actual temperatures in these areas on a Tuesday. So Tuesday and Wednesday is going to be brutally cold up here into our New England. So definitely be on the lookout for that. But now let's kind of zoom out and let's take a look at what's happening down the road. So as we look at Wednesday, this is Wednesday, January the 12th. We look at some of these vorticities. I showed you this trough out here off into the Pacific here, and we got a pretty good significant trough that's going to be developing off the west coast of south of Alaska here. We're watching these two systems, and eventually these will push eastward and kind of merge together as we get into the day on Friday. So you can kind of see a lull on Thursday. There's not much activity. Again, it warms up for a good chunk of the country, out here in the midsection of the country and out west as well. We do have some rain showers coming back into play for the Pacific Northwest, but a lot of the heavier rain this week is going to be in Washington and really along the coast. Kind of get a reprieve out here into our mountain regions of all that heavier snow you've had of late. It starts to dry out a little bit in these sections. So some of the flooding rain, or at least the heavier rain, is going to be more or less elongated into Washington and British Columbia, with a little bit lighter amounts getting into portions of Oregon, this week. But as we take a look and expand the view and go into Friday, you can see these two systems merge in the upper Midwest of the country. And as they merge and kind of phase together, that's going to set the stage for our next developing snow that's going to be breaking out in the upper Midwest. So by the time we get to that Friday afternoon time frame on the 14th of January, this is the storm track we've been kind of highlighted. And so this is where this originates. It's going to be starting in Minnesota, getting into portions of Wisconsin here, going into upper state Michigan, with that freezing line to the south of here. As that storm continues to kind of strengthen in the midsection of the country, it will continue diving down in the southeast. Yesterday, we had this trough out west, right? But as the phasing and the slowing down of the trough, it unfortunately doesn't really bring much precipitation now for portions of the Southwest and much of Texas, where it's been bone dry. And kind of the same deal again, it just flattens out. But soon as it hits the Gulf, it reactivates again, and that's what's basically going to happen again. You're going to be dry out here in the midsection of the country in the Southwest and West Texas, but as soon as it hits the Gulf moisture, it's going to reactivate and elongate and really kind of amplify as we get into the Ohio Valley. So we could be looking at some heavier snow starting to break out into portions of Illinois and Indiana and Ohio, and yes, in Kentucky again, and portions of Tennessee, and then rain on the south side. We're just kind of watching this come together. But look at the system, it kind of really, as that one pulse of vorticity kind of merges together, it really starts to rotate and kind of spin around, and really kind of gaining its strength and pulling in that moisture from the Gulf, and really starting to intensify as we get into that, Saturday, January 15th time frame, as it heads up into the mid-Atlantic states and the Northeast again, with a low pressure system again off the coast with heavier snow, moderate snow pulling in on the northern side, some of this heavier snow could be breaking out again into portions of West Virginia, into Pennsylvania, into upstate New York. And of course, we'll fine tune this as we get closer, but this looks to be the storm track for the 14th, 15th, and 16th time frame going forward. And yeah, by next Sunday, it looks to really start to intensify and really amplify off the coast again. So this could be yet another fairly significant snowstorm coming brewing for that 14th, 16th, 14th, 15th, 16th time frame. So here's the rain amounts for the next week. So yeah, you can see all the heavier rains in the Pacific Northwest, more or less elongated into Washington, a little bit lighter amounts as you feed into Oregon. But for the most part, as you get into the interior regions, it dries out. And yeah, it's bone dry out here in the desert Southwest into West Texas and really the midsection of the country. And like I mentioned, as it taps into that Gulf moisture, boom, that's where it activates again. And then, yeah, some of the heavier rains are going to be more or less elongated into Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, getting into Tennessee and Kentucky again. And some of this actually could be in the form of snow, right? So let's look at some of these preliminary totals so far. And of course, this is a week out, but right now we're looking at just kind of the storm track this particular is going to be taking as we get into that time frame. So more or less elongated into portions of Minnesota, maybe as far south as Tennessee, and then getting up the coast here, heading up the coast in northern Jersey, and then going into our southern New England states. And some of these snow amounts could be fairly significant. Of course, we'll fine tune this in the days ahead, but right now we're just looking at more or less kind of pattern recognition and some of the storm signals and some of the dates that we're going to be fine-tuning in the days ahead with this another significant snowstorm that looks to be on the table. So what's behind that, right? So you know, things are changing. We're getting to be in that time frame. It's the middle of, would be the middle of January now. So we're getting to be in that coldest time of the year historically. January 15th to February 15th. That's typically when, like, say, the southern jet tends to lower a little bit. So those areas in our southern states, if you're ever going to see snow for this season, this would typically be the time that you would see it in, right? Between that middle of January, that middle of February, you know, 15th time frame. For those 4 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, typically that's when, if you are going to see some snow, the jet stream typically lowers enough by then where you get some of these southern tracks just track a little bit further south. And so one of the things that we look at is the Southern Oscillation Index. And so these are kind of storm tracks. We're in a La Nina. So I showed you it's fairly dry for our Southwest and West Texas, and all those areas been predominantly dry because of the La Nina. But you also look for hints of storm developments and negative drops. So you can actually see the leading indicator back on December the 21st. We actually had a negative 27 drop on the SOI. That's basically the subtropical jet. And that is about a 10 to 14 day leading indicator, or kind of a lagging indicator. So that put the bullseye January 3rd, January 4th time frame, and that was set the table for all the energy that fed the snowstorm further south. That's why Alabama saw some snow, Arkansas saw some snow, went up the Tennessee Valley, and then really amplified as it went up into our northeast. Now, let's take a look at what's happening now. We had some reprieve. We had a snowstorm in between, but now we see several significant drops in the SOI index and back to a negative 27. So you count the days, 10 to 14 day lagging indicator. You got the snowstorm on the 14th, 15th, 16th time frame. So you go back, you know, 10 to 14 days out from the 8th and the 9th time frame. That puts you about the 21 to the 22nd to the 23rd time frame. So that's another timestamp that we're going to be looking at for yet possibly another significant snowstorm that might be on the table. And we look at the teleconnections. If there's any cold air around, yeah, there's going to be plenty, guys. This EPO, which is your Eastern Pacific Oscillation, takes the nosedive negative by the midweek. By the 13th. So that's the beginning stages for our 13th or 14th, 15th, 16th snowstorm, right? And so as the EPA goes negative, that puts the colder air in the central and eastern 2/3 of the United States. Well, it continues to dive negative and actually takes the abyss with the GFS. And by the time we get in that 25th time frame, So there's plenty of guidance going forward. Say, hey, there's a lot more cold air on the table. This is already your coldest time of the year. And when you start to see these teleconnections taking a nosedive, actually this far south on the deviations, that is going to be pretty significant cold air. And then if we get the jet stream to lower as well, here's the jet stream by the time we get in that 21st time frame. So yeah, look at the jet stream pulling all the way down here in the south into our subtropical jet here in the Pacific. We've got the jet stream in the midsection of the country pulling a little bit further south, right? So you have these low pressure systems setting up further south, and you got that cold air draining from the north. What that sets the stage for possibly a snowstorm developing a little bit further south, because you have the jet stream dipping further south. And so obviously we'll have to fine tune this track going forward. But yes, it looks like we have yet, even beyond that signal that we're looking at for this weekend, we have yet another one. And this one could be pretty significant, even probably maybe the biggest of yet, might be coming for that 21st, 22nd, 23rd time frame. So right now, this far out, we just kind of look for, like, say, pattern recognition, kind of eyeball some of these storm tracks and dates going forward. But man, while all the indications are on the table, we got a lot more cold air pressing south, and the little bit of more active jet stream, especially in the subtropical jet, things could get fairly interesting, especially as we get in that second half of January, and especially that third week of January. So hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely leave your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel to catch the latest update where I protect you before and after the storm.